Miss Everly, the contract is signed. As agreed, we will arrange a staged death for you in 17 days. In the private meeting room, a staff member handed the newly drafted paper contract to Meline Everly. She took it, flipping through it casually, and confirmed with them one more time, "Will the body for the faked death look like me?" The staff member puffed out his chest, full of confidence. "Rest assured, the body is custom made to your exact measurements. No one will ever suspect a thing." With that guarantee, Meline finally felt at ease. She took a card from her purse and, without a second thought, swiped it to pay handsomely before turning to leave. Outside the door, the first thing that greeted her was a luxurious stretch Lincoln. The driver, who had been waiting, saw Meline emerge and respectfully hurried to open the car door. "Miss Everly." She nodded in acknowledgement and slid directly into the back seat of the luxury car. The driver closed the door for her before returning to his seat and starting the engine. The car moved smoothly through the city, eventually stopping outside the Everly villa. This was the house Meline had bought specifically to live with Ethan Hayes. Not long after she returned, the villa's main door opened once again. In walked a strikingly handsome man, tall and poised. He wore a simple white shirt and black trousers. His back was straight and proud, radiating a cold aura. His looks were otherworldly, but his demeanor was detached and kept everyone at a distance. He unfastened his cufflinks with deliberate slowness, walked straight to Meline, and swept her up into his arms, heading deeper into the house. "Ethan, don't," to his surprise, she reacted strongly in the next second, struggling out of his embrace. Ethan's deep eyes, as cool as moonlight, stared at her, seemingly confused by what new scene she was making. "Don't. Making me sleep with you every day, wasn't that the condition when you bought me? Lately, that won't be necessary for now. My period came early this month." Meline lowered her head and lied, her words mumbled and unclear. Fortunately, he didn't seem to care, simply saying, "Then I'll get back to work." Ethan had indeed been very busy. He was in the middle of preparing a startup project, and it had reached a critical stage. She didn't try to keep him, just nodded and let him go. Meline assumed he would be busy all night. However, not long after, he took a phone call and rushed out of the study. Seeing her still in the living room, he stopped short. "Since you don't need me tonight, I'm heading out. I have something important to handle." Seeing the rare hint of urgency in his otherwise impassive expression, Meline already knew the answer. What important matter? It was just for Sylvia Quinn. But she said nothing, merely nodding. With her permission, Ethan didn't linger. He brushed past her as he hurried away. As he reached the door and was about to push it open, she suddenly called out to him. "Ethan, actually, in the future, you don't have to." Hearing her voice, Ethan subconsciously stopped, frowning as he waited for her to finish. But her voice died in her throat when she met his somewhat impatient gaze. "Just go." In the end, she didn't say the rest of the sentence. She just told him to leave. It wasn't until his figure had completely vanished into the darkness that she finally whispered the rest to herself. "Actually, you won't have to do this ever again, because soon I'll be leaving for good." As the wealthy heiress of an elite A-city family, Meline Everly had money, looks, and a great figure. She had done many reckless things in her life. But the most reckless of all was buying a boyfriend with money during her freshman year of college. He was the famous heartthrob of Capital University, an untouchable prize pursued by countless girls who sent him love letters daily. The line of his admirers stretched from their campus to other schools, but his personality was cold and aloof. He rejected everyone with the same indifference, busying himself only with classes and part-time jobs. Meline had fallen for Ethan at first sight, her only thought to conquer this untouchable prize for herself. So, when she learned that his parents had passed away and he had been raised by his grandmother, who was now bedridden with a chronic illness, and that his part-time jobs were only to cover his grandmother's medical bills, she found Ethan and made a deal with him. She would pay for his grandmother's medical expenses. In return, he would be her boyfriend, come home on time every day, and be intimate with her a specified number of times until she grew tired of him. At the time, his grandmother's condition was severe, and he desperately needed a large sum of money to save his only living relative. So, he agreed. Now, 5 years had passed. Meline and Ethan had both graduated and started working, but the nature of their relationship hadn't changed. Mrs. Hayes's illness was still not cured, and Madeline hadn't grown tired of him. He still lived in her villa. His attitude toward her remained as cold as ever. She hadn't given up, thinking that with enough time, she could one day warm his heart. That was until a few days ago when she accidentally fell down the stairs and hit her head. That was when she unexpectedly awakened and realized she was living inside a novel. The male lead was Ethan Hayes, and the female lead was his childhood sweetheart, Sylvia Quinn. And she was just the villainess according to the novel's plot. The startup project Ethan was working on would be a massive success in 17 days. He would become a rising business magnate overnight, and his career would skyrocket, eventually placing him at the pinnacle of the business world. And the first thing he would do after his success was give her a large sum of money and break up with her. But she wouldn't agree. She would cling to him relentlessly. Later, seeing him and Sylvia grow closer, she would become consumed by jealousy, repeatedly harassing and harming Sylvia until Ethan completely despised her, leading to her tragic death on the streets. Madeline refused to believe something so absurd, and she especially couldn't believe she would do something so foolish. But everything that had happened recently followed the novel's plot almost exactly. And Ethan's repeated habit of abandoning her to go to Sylvia forced her to understand that the male lead and female lead were destined to fall in love. After a week of torment, she finally came to her senses. She couldn't gamble with her life. To completely escape the plot and change her final ending, Madeline made her decision. She couldn't love him anymore. She had to fake her death and leave this place, leave Ethan Hayes forever. Chapter 2, haunted by visions of the future, Madeline tossed and turned all night. Ethan didn't come back, and she didn't call to check on him. The next day, she rose early. After washing up, she went straight downstairs and ate breakfast alone. The villa was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft chewing of her food. After she finished, the butler approached her, a look of hesitation on his face. "I've dismissed all the staff as you instructed. I'll be returning to the main family estate today as well. Miss, are you sure you don't need any servants?" "I don't." Madeline shook her head, because soon she wouldn't be here anymore. Seeing the butler's worried expression, she didn't offer much of an explanation. She simply went upstairs, retrieved a letter, and handed it to him, instructing him to deliver it personally to her parents, Richard and Helen Everly. She was afraid her faked death would devastate them, so she had explained everything in the letter. It clearly stated that in 17 days, she would be going abroad to live under a new identity. She told them not to worry and promised to return secretly to visit when the time was right. Madeline had considered taking her parents with her, but they were older, and their lives and business were all rooted here. Moreover, the story of her awakening was too bizarre. It couldn't be explained in a few words and would only make them think she had gone mad. Besides, if Richard and Helen Everly disappeared along with her, Madeline feared Ethan might become suspicious. So, after weighing all the factors, she decided it was best for her parents to stay and for her to leave alone. After arranging her own affairs, Madeline began to sort out matters related to Ethan. Having dismissed all the staff, she took a basket of fruit and went to visit Mrs. Hayes. She didn't have the airs of a rich heiress. Over the years, she had visited Mrs. Hayes whenever she had free time, always bringing gifts to cheer her up, chatting with her to ease her loneliness, and even teaching her how to use a smartphone to see the world without leaving her room. So in stark contrast to Ethan's coldness, Mrs. Hayes was genuinely fond of Madeline. "Maddie, dear, when are you and Ethan planning to get married?" When Mrs. Hayes brought up the question again, the usual shyness was gone from Madeline's face, replaced only by a bitter smile. How could they ever get married? Even if she weren't leaving in 17 days, she would likely still face the same fate as in the original novel. The person Ethan loved was Sylvia Quinn. How could he possibly marry her? Seeing her silence, Mrs. Hayes sighed but still tried to comfort her. "I know, my grandson. Ethan isn't completely without feelings for you. It's just that the way you two got together wasn't pure. He surely has a barrier in his heart. Once you overcome that, I'm sure you two can be happy together." Madeline listened to Mrs. Hayes's words of encouragement and forced a smile. She knew the plot of the novel. She knew the only person Ethan had ever loved was Sylvia. The male lead only loves the female lead. How could he fall for the villainess? In the end, she said nothing and didn't refute Mrs. Hayes's words. She just took out a bank card. "Grandma, when you get a chance, could you please give this card to Ethan for me?" She had prepared this card long ago as startup capital for Ethan, but she had hesitated, worried it would hurt his pride. Now that she had awakened and decided to leave, it was best to have Mrs. Hayes give it to him. She hoped that this gesture might make Ethan think of her a little more kindly, so that after her death, he wouldn't do anything too disrespectful to her body. Mrs. Hayes immediately sensed that something was wrong with Madeline. "Did you and Ethan have another fight?" she asked with concern. Madeline shook her head. "We didn't fight. It's just that in a little while I'm going to a place very far away." Before she could finish, a cold voice interrupted her. "What very far away place are you going to?" Chapter 3, Madeline whirled around to see Ethan standing behind her, a dark expression on his face. And next to him stood Sylvia Quinn. Madeline averted her gaze and brushed it off with a casual excuse. "I'm going on a trip in a little while." In Ethan's eyes, her two favorite things were sleeping with him and traveling the world. So, hearing her answer, he composed himself and didn't press further. He smoothly led Sylvia to a seat by Mrs. Hayes's bed, effortlessly pushing Madeline to the furthest spot. "Grandma, you have no idea how stingy Ethan can be on the way here. I just wanted an ice cream, and he wouldn't even buy it for me." "You have to give him a talking to," Sylvia started complaining the moment she sat down, pouting as she recounted her grievance. Ethan looked at her with a helpless expression. His words were a rebuttal, but they were filled with concern for her. "You're one to talk. Have you forgotten your period is coming soon? You still dare to eat something cold. I wonder who it was that was crying in agony last time, swearing they'd never eat ice cream again and asking me to watch over them." Sylvia giggled and stuck out her tongue, and his eyes filled with nothing but doting affection. There were 4 people in the room, but from the moment Ethan and Sylvia arrived, his eyes saw only her. Pushed to the very edge, Madeline watched the easy, natural atmosphere between them and couldn't help but laugh at herself. It was always like this. Among them, she was always the outsider. But this time, it didn't hurt as much as it used to. This time, she had let go of everything, let go of Ethan, and let go of all her love for him. She had completely returned him to the female lead. Mrs. Hayes noticed the fleeting sadness in Madeline's eyes. Glancing at Ethan, who was deliberately ignoring her, she sighed inwardly. "Ethan, Maddie, I'd like some grapes. Could you 2 wash some for me, please?" At Mrs. Hayes's request, neither Madeline nor Ethan would refuse. He picked up the fruit basket from the bedside table, and they walked out of the hospital room, one after the other. But just as they stepped out, he grabbed her hand. Madeline was surprised. He was actually initiating contact with her today. But in the next second, his cold words followed. "You should visit Grandma less often in the future. It's true I sold myself to you, but my grandmother is not part of the deal." That single sentence made her momentary surprise feel like a joke. A faint bitterness welled up inside her. If this were the past, she would have rushed to explain that he was always busy, that Mrs. Hayes was old and got lonely, and that she had no ulterior motives other than to keep her company. But now she just lowered her head and said calmly, "Okay." After speaking, she walked toward the washroom without waiting for him, unlike in the past when she would have insisted on walking with him. Watching her retreating back, a strange feeling arose in Ethan's heart. Since yesterday, her behavior had started to change. Chapter 4, after washing the fruit, Madeline and Ethan returned to the room. They chatted for a while longer before the group prepared to leave. As soon as they stepped out of the hospital, Sylvia spoke up. "Ethan, Miss Everly, it's almost dinner time. Why don't we all eat together?" Ethan naturally wouldn't refuse Sylvia's suggestion. As for Madeline, perhaps to prevent her from throwing a tantrum and giving Sylvia a hard time, he agreed on her behalf before she could even speak. At the restaurant, they followed the waiter into a private room. He smoothly took the menu and ordered, but it wasn't until all the dishes were served that Madeline realized he had ordered all of Sylvia's favorites. Perhaps this was the difference between being loved and not. Even though she had once demanded he memorize all her preferences, one was forced and the other was from the heart. The difference was night and day. Fortunately, Madeline had anticipated this outcome and wasn't too disappointed. She just ate her meal in silence, saying nothing. Halfway through dinner, a sharp ringtone echoed through the room. Ethan took his phone and stepped outside. Just then, Madeline's eyes froze on the pinky ring on Sylvia's hand as she ladled soup. Where did you get that pinky ring? Sylvia glanced at the ring on her little finger, seemingly oblivious, and answered with a smile, "Oh, this. Ethan gave it to me. I said it was pretty, so he gave it to me." At those words, Madeline's expression instantly darkened. This pinky ring was a gift she had spent ages meticulously crafting, her hands covered in cuts and scratches by the end. She had given it to Ethan herself on their anniversary. Inside the ring, a line of small text was engraved. "Madeline Everly will love Ethan Hayes forever." She had bared her soul, offering him all her love, raw and unveiled, yet he had cared so little that he'd casually given it away to Sylvia. A nameless fury churned within her. But in the next moment, the plot of the original novel flooded her mind. The person Ethan loved was Sylvia. Of course, he wouldn't care about a gift from her. If she made a fuss over it now, wouldn't that just make him despise her even more? It was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over her head, and she instantly calmed down. Composing herself, she managed a slight smile. "It's beautiful, it suits you very well." Sylvia had been waiting for her to explode, but Madeline's calm reaction, letting the matter drop, surprised her. A flash of astonishment crossed her eyes. She bit her lip, then suddenly stood up and diligently ladled a bowl of soup, handing it to Madeline. "Miss Everly, don't just eat rice. This seafood soup is excellent, you should try some." Madeline was allergic to seafood and was about to refuse, but she saw that Sylvia didn't hand her the bowl. Instead, with a twist of her wrist, the bowl clattered to the floor. Her eyes filled with grievance and tears, looking utterly wronged. Before Madeline could even process what kind of drama Sylvia was staging, Ethan rushed past her like a gust of wind, shielding Sylvia behind him. Then, his icy gaze shot straight at her. "Madeline, what are you doing?" With red-rimmed eyes, Sylvia buried herself in his arms and added fuel to the fire. "Ethan, it's all my fault. I must have made Maddie angry, that's why she threw the soup at me. I just got a little scalded, it's nothing. Please don't blame her." I didn't. Hearing her twist the truth, Madeline's eyes widened as she tried to explain, but he turned a deaf ear. He gave her a cold look, threw out the words, "Madeline, you're being completely unreasonable," and then, without another word, picked up Sylvia and left. Watching his cold back and Sylvia's triumphant glare, Madeline stood frozen in place, her heart sinking to the bottom. What she didn't expect was that in the following days, Sylvia, having discovered how effective this tactic was, seemed to become addicted to framing her. One day, it was that Madeline had gotten her fired from her job. The next, it was that Madeline had blacklisted her from the entire industry. She even claimed Madeline had sent people to splash paint on her door, giving her no peace. Ethan's patience wore thin until he finally couldn't take it anymore. Upon returning home, he grabbed Madeline's arm. "Madeline, if you have a problem, take it out on me. Why are you targeting Sylvia?" In their 5 years together, Ethan had always been cold and distant. This was the first time Madeline had seen him so openly emotional, but it was all to defend Sylvia. "I didn't target her. I didn't do those things." She tried her best to explain, but he still looked at her with disbelief. "If not you, then who could it be? You're someone who would buy a boyfriend, what wouldn't you do? Don't let it happen again. I've given you everything. Why can't you just leave the people around me alone?" After throwing those words at her, his eyes filled with disappointment. Unwilling to say another word, he went straight to the guest room. Madeline watched his retreating back, desperately suppressing the pain in her heart. In his mind, she would always be the one he couldn't trust. But beyond the pain, she felt a growing sense of panic. She only had a few days left before she was supposed to leave. But if things continued like this, she feared Ethan might be the end of her before she even got to her faked death. She lay in bed, tossing and turning all night. Finally, an idea came to her. That evening, she drove to Sylvia's apartment. Her first words were, "Sylvia, let's call a truce. From now on, I'll help you get together with Ethan." Chapter 5. Hearing this, Sylvia's eyes widened in disbelief. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Sylvia knew better than anyone how much Madeline loved Ethan. Why else would she have willingly paid for Mrs. Hayes's medical bills for 5 years? Why else would she have followed him without complaint, even after being rejected and treated coldly time and time again? But now, Madeline was coming to her, offering to play matchmaker between her and Ethan. Hearing her doubt, Madeline shook her head. "I'm not talking nonsense. I'm sincerely offering a truce. You don't need to waste your energy framing me anymore. I don't have much time left. I'll be leaving Ethan soon. You don't have to see me as a rival." Her expression didn't seem fake, but Sylvia still didn't believe her, suspecting some kind of trap. Meline didn't care whether she believed her or not. She focused on action. The next day, as Ethan was about to leave, she stopped him and handed him a ticket to Universal Studios. "I bought 2 tickets for Universal Studios tonight. Come with me. I have to work on my project," he began, his expression cold, but she cut him off. "Our deal said that besides sleeping with me, you can't refuse any of my requests." That single sentence shut down all of Ethan's protests. He took the ticket with a frown and quickened his pace as he left. Watching his figure disappear, Meline picked up her phone and dialed Sylvia's number. She answered quickly. Without any pleasantries, Meline got straight to the point. "You got the ticket I just sent, right? I gave the other one to Ethan. Dress up nicely today and work on your relationship with him." Sylvia hadn't expected Meline to actually go through with setting her up with Ethan. She answered with a hesitant, "Uh-huh." Just as Meline was about to hang up, Sylvia suddenly asked, "Why are you helping me?" The question came through the phone. Meline paused for a moment but ultimately didn't answer. "You don't need to know, just stick to our agreement. I'll set you 2 up and you stop framing me." After hanging up, she stared at the darkening screen, her mind replaying Sylvia's question. Why are you helping me? She wasn't helping Sylvia. The person she was really trying to help was herself. Besides, the person Ethan truly loved was Sylvia anyway. She was just speeding up the original plot, and, in doing so, giving herself a way out. As night fell completely, Meline received a message from Sylvia. It was a photo of them together. In the picture, Sylvia was looking at the camera, while Ethan was looking at Sylvia. His eyes filled with a tenderness and adoration she had never seen when they were alone. In their 5 years together, she had asked him countless times for a photo together, but his answer was always, "I don't like taking pictures." It turned out that when faced with someone you love, such principles could be broken. She scrolled through the photos, and one in the middle caught her eye. The background was a restaurant. In front of him was a plate of peeled shrimp and a large pile of shells. She remembered all the times they had eaten shrimp together over the years. It was always her who peeled them and placed them in his bowl. He had never once done it for her. Looking at these tender moments she had once dreamed of, she remained silent for a long time before finally typing a message and sending it. "Nice, you two look great together." Chapter 6. Sylvia had always suspected that Meline had ulterior motives for doing all this and had deliberately sent the photos to provoke her, hoping she would reveal her true intentions. But Medeline's message, filled with what seemed like a blessing, left Sylvia completely bewildered. The typing indicator in the chat box flickered for a long time. Sylvia revised her message countless times before finally sending a single sentence. "Were you serious yesterday? Are you really going to set me and Ethan up?" This time, Medeline's reply was swift, just a single word. "Yes. From now on, Ethan is yours." Meline had expected Ethan to be happy when he returned that day. But when he walked through the door, he was still as cold as ice, his tone laced with an unidentifiable anger. "Meline, what was today about? What are you trying to do now?" She paused, confused by his attitude, but still offered an explanation. "Are you talking about the tickets? Something came up and I couldn't go, so I gave my ticket to Sylvia." Then, she asked eagerly, "Did you two have fun today? Did you ride the Ferris wheel? Go to the haunted house? If you didn't get to do everything, I still have 2 more tickets. You can go with her again tomorrow." Ethan couldn't figure out her motive. He stared at her for a long time, but she just looked back at him with a sincere expression, as if she truly had just been too busy and had given the tickets to him and Sylvia. After a long while, he was the first to back down and went straight to his room. With this matchmaking attempt a success, Meline redoubled her efforts, creating all sorts of opportunities for them. For instance, she invited him to a romantic restaurant. Just as they sat down, Sylvia would appear before them with a look of pleasant surprise. "Ethan, what a coincidence!" Before he could speak, a waiter would conveniently approach. "Sir, ma'am, this year is our anniversary celebration. You are the 52nd couple to arrive, so the restaurant is gifting you a pair of couples' rings and a complimentary couples photo." As soon as the waiter finished, Meline would suddenly stand up. "I'm suddenly not feeling well. I think I'll head back." Seeing her get up to leave, Ethan would start to follow, but she would turn back as if she'd just remembered something. Winning a prize is a good thing. It would be a shame to waste it. Ethan, why don't you and Sylvia go? Without waiting for his reaction, she would hurry out of the restaurant, speeding away in her car, leaving a stunned Ethan and a blushing Sylvia, who was already pulling him to go claim their couple's rings and take their photo. Another time, their university classmates organized a reunion. Meline insisted on dragging Ethan along, only to discover that Sylvia was also there. At the end of the night, she pushed Sylvia in front of him. "It's late and not safe for a girl to go home alone. You should drive her back first. I'll just grab a cab. Oh, and don't rush back. She's had a bit too much to drink, so you should stay at her place and take care of her." Without giving him a chance to object, she shoved the car keys into his hand and walked straight to the curb to hail a taxi. After a few instances like this, Ethan finally noticed something was wrong. Lately, he seemed to run into Sylvia at all sorts of places and times. And every single time, Meline would leave, leaving him alone with Sylvia. It was as if she was trying to push him towards Sylvia Chapter 7 a few days later. Ethan came home drunk from a business dinner. Seeing Meline seemingly asleep in bed, he went straight to the bathroom without a word. As the sound of running water filled the room, she suddenly opened her eyes. Glancing at the closed bathroom door, she quickly pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Get to my villa right now." 20 minutes later, Sylvia Quinn knocked on the door of the Everly villa. Meline quietly let her in and handed her a lacy nightgown she had just found. "Change into this and go sleep in the master bedroom." Hearing her words and seeing the nightgown in her hand, Sylvia seemed to understand. Her heart began to pound, feeling as if it would leap out of her chest. At Medeline's urging, she snapped back to reality, hurried upstairs, changed into the nightgown, and lay down on the bed. Not long after Sylvia had settled in, the bathroom door was suddenly pulled open. Ethan, with only a towel wrapped around his waist, walked out, drying his hair. He looked up, and his gaze froze on the figure in the bed. Perhaps thinking about how long it had been since they had fulfilled their initial agreement, he strode forward and naturally pulled the person into his arms. His voice was husky from the alcohol. "Your period's over, right?" Before Sylvia could even process what that meant, she felt the mattress dip behind her. Hot breath fanned across the nape of her neck, and a large hand instantly wrapped around her waist. His scorching body temperature made her tremble, and her breathing quickened. A low chuckle came from behind her, followed by a trail of kisses on her ear and neck. Sylvia, who had never been with a man before, couldn't handle such advances and let out an involuntary cry. At that single sound, Ethan's movements froze. He abruptly pulled away, his voice filled with disbelief. "Sylvia?" In the living room downstairs, Ethan sat on the sofa while Sylvia, draped in a blanket, sat beside him, her face etched with embarrassment. His face was as dark as ink as his gaze fell on Meline, who was standing nearby. "What is going on?" Meline hadn't expected him to find out so quickly. She felt a twinge of guilt but still tried to cover it up with an excuse. "Sylvia's power went out, so I let her stay here for the night." Then why was she sleeping in the master bedroom? Ethan clearly didn't believe her excuse and pressed on. Meline hesitated for a moment before replying, "The guest room wasn't made up. I figured it was just for one night, so I let her sleep in the master bedroom." His eyes held a simmering anger, his chest heaving. He was clearly furious. He didn't believe her explanation, but the most important thing now was to take Sylvia home. Suppressing his rage, he said no more, simply pulling Sylvia up and leaving without another word. By the time Ethan returned, Meline was already back in the bedroom. Now that they were alone, his anger was no longer restrained. Ethan had noticed Medeline's strange behavior for a while, but it was at this moment that he finally couldn't hold back any longer. "Meline, what are you trying to do? What, have you come up with some new way to torment us?" His blunt words stunned her. Meline hadn't expected him to think that way. It felt like a heavy hammer blow to her heart, painful and suffocating. "I just thought I should." The explanation slipped out, but she caught herself just in time, stopping before she revealed everything. His gaze was heavy as he pressed on. "You should what? Say it." Chapter 8. After a long silence, Meline finally spoke again, but she didn't answer his question. "I'm sorry. I thought you would like it." Her apology was the last straw, completely igniting the fire of his anger. "You're always so self-righteous." He threw the cold words at her, and with a heavy presence, turned and left the bedroom. Watching him leave, Madeline vaguely understood. Right, he was still hers by their contract. Given his principles, he wouldn't do anything with Sylvia, no matter how much he liked her. Fortunately, in 3 more days, it would all be over. As her departure date drew near, Madeline gathered everything in the villa related to Ethan. She threw some things away and burned the rest, clearing it all out. From the photos she had collected of his various speeches and debates in college to the matching couple's mugs, slippers, and pajamas she had bought for them, as well as the good luck charm she had prayed for to keep him safe. Every single item was a testament to her love for Ethan. The last things to be burned were the love letters she had written to him. As she tossed them into the fire one by one, her thoughts drifted back to the past. Initially, Madeline had pursued Ethan in a normal way. She had even spent 3 months writing 99 love letters, but every single one of them had ended in rejection. It was only later, when she saw him struggling with the medical bills, that she came up with her plan, a way for him to accept her help while she got what she wanted. Perhaps she had been wrong all along. True love couldn't be bought. The novel had said it too. The male lead, Ethan Hayes, loved only his female lead, Sylvia Quinn. With that thought, Madeline felt no more attachment. She tossed the last love letter in her hand into the flames. The front door was suddenly thrown open. Ethan had just returned, and his eyes immediately fell on the colorful envelope she had thrown into the fire. He had never read the contents, but he recognized the envelope all too well. It was one of the love letters she had once presented to him, all of which he had rejected. He felt his heart skip a beat, and a question escaped his lips without thinking. "What are you doing?" Madeline looked through the raging flames at Ethan's stunned face. She found it a bit strange, but after a moment, she answered his question. "Burning things? This stuff is useless now, so I'm burning it." A sense of panic rose in Ethan's chest. He had noticed Madeline's changes lately, and she was always doing strange things. Though he didn't want to be confrontational, the words that came out of his mouth were sharp and unforgiving. "Right, you got what you wanted. Of course, this stuff is useless now." Ethan had mocked her like this plenty of times before, and it always made her sad. But this time, she felt nothing but a calm emptiness. "It will all be over soon." Her cryptic remark just made Ethan feel she was being even more bizarre, and he had no idea what she was up to. He didn't stay, nor did he pay any more attention to the things she was burning. He went straight upstairs to the study. Madeline remained seated, unmoving, watching as the flames consumed the last love letter until it was nothing but ash. Deprived of fuel, the fire could no longer rage and finally died out in the dust. "Ethan, from now on, forget this humiliating memory. Forget me, the villainess. Let's both start a new life." Chapter 9. The next morning, as Ethan was about to leave, Madeline called out to him. "Tomorrow is our 5th anniversary. I've booked a yacht. Let's go watch the sea and the sunset together." She was always coming up with these impulsive ideas. He hoped she wasn't planning any new tricks. With that thought, Ethan just gave a cold mhem and left. Perhaps it was the anticipation, but the day seemed to fly by for Madeline. Soon, it was the appointed day, the day of her faked death. She took special care in dressing up before taking Ethan to the chartered yacht. The view from the yacht was beautiful. The afterglow of the setting sun scattered across the sea and the deck, casting a warm orange light on her. The sea and sky blended together, creating a breathtaking picture. Looking at the scene before him, a strange look crossed Ethan's eyes. But in the next second, this rare moment of tranquility was shattered by a sharp ringtone. When Madeline looked back at him, he was already on the phone, discussing work. She knew he was busy with his project. In just a few more hours, it would launch and become a massive success. It was the turning point in his life and in hers. "Ethan, if you had a lot of money, what would you do?" By the time Madeline spoke, Ethan had already hung up. Hearing her odd question, he just said lightly, "Do whatever I want." There was no particular expression on his face as he said it, as if it were just an off-the-cuff remark. But looking at that face, which had never shown her a hint of tenderness, she couldn't help but think, "When you get rich, the first thing you'll do is get rid of me. But don't worry, Ethan. This time, I won't make you do the dirty work." On the deck, a waiter began to serve the food in an orderly fashion. Soon, the table was filled with exquisite dishes. Only half of the sun remained above the horizon. Madeline and Ethan sat opposite each other. She had no appetite despite the beautiful food, and he, as usual, was a man of few words. The silence between them was broken again by Ethan's phone. The name, Sylvia, lit up the screen. He hesitated for a moment before answering. The moment he answered, Sylvia's soft, tearful voice came through the phone, clearly audible to both of them. "Ethan, I've been in a car accident. Can you come to the hospital?" Hearing this, Ethan frowned. He turned to look at Madeline. She put down her knife and fork at just the right moment. "I heard. Do you want to go?" He didn't hesitate. "We can celebrate our anniversary anytime. Sylvia needs me right now." She said nothing, just looked at him calmly. Seeing her expression, his heart began to beat erratically. He had always been frighteningly calm, but this was the first time he had ever felt a loss of control. So he uncharacteristically added, "The anniversary, I'll make it up to you next time." With that, he grabbed his phone, stood up, and she watched his panicked figure hurry off the yacht. She didn't try to stop him. A long time later, she whispered to herself, "Ethan, for us, there is no next time." Madeline watched the sunset alone. The last of the evening light disappeared beneath the sea, and the lights on the yacht gradually came on. A staff member boarded the yacht and walked straight to her. "Miss Everly, everything is ready." Hearing his voice, she didn't turn around, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. "How will I die?" "You'll fall into the sea by accident. The news will spread in an hour. Your body will then float at sea for 3 days before being found by the police and confirmed deceased." The staff member detailed her death. Madeline nodded, having no objections. With everything arranged, she turned and disembarked from the yacht. She took one last look at the city, then put on the hat and mask she had prepared, snapped her phone's SIM card in half, and walked toward the airport without a backward glance. "Ethan, this time, I'm personally delivering you to your leading lady. And I, the villainess, am officially logging off from your world Chapter 10. It was 3 days later when Ethan returned to the villa. A rare smile graced his face. Sylvia's injuries were healing, and the project he had worked on for so long had become a massive hit upon its launch. He could finally enter the upper echelons of society on his own merits, no longer the poor student who had to sell himself to pay his grandmother's medical bills. In his pocket was the first sum of money he had earned from the project. He planned to give it back to Madeline as soon as he saw her. Once the debt between them was settled, he could finally stand tall in front of her. But when Ethan pushed open the door, the villa was empty and silent. Madeline, who usually waited for him in the living room, was nowhere to be seen. A strange feeling crept over him, and for some reason, his heart felt empty too. Remembering her unusual behavior lately, a sense of unease grew within him. Was this another one of her schemes to torment him? He couldn't be sure, so he pulled out his phone to send her a message. Just then, a news alert popped up on his screen. Heiress of A city's wealthiest family, the Everlys, reported missing. A body was later discovered in the sea. Police have confirmed the body is that of the Everly heiress. Cause of death is still under investigation. The short sentence struck Ethan like a bolt of lightning. He couldn't believe his eyes, but his hand moved uncontrollably to tap on the news story. The photos that were released were not very clear, but he recognized the floating body at a glance. His eyes widened as he desperately searched for any proof that the body wasn't Madeline's, but the more he looked, the more his heart sank. The body's build, the clothes, they were identical to what Madeline had been wearing when he left her. She was dead? No, he had to see for himself. He wouldn't believe she was gone like this unless he saw her body with his own eyes. Ethan staggered toward the door. Though it was only a few steps away, his legs felt so weak that he nearly fell several times. He had intended to drive to the police station himself, but when he tried to start the car, his hands trembled so much he couldn't even hold the key. He had no choice but to walk a little further and hail a taxi. The taxi quickly arrived at the police station. For a moment, Ethan felt a sense of dread. He didn't know what he would do if the body really was Madeline's. "Sir, we've arrived. Aren't you getting out?" The driver waited for a moment, watching his expression change in the rearview mirror. Seeing the destination, he thought Ethan was a criminal turning himself in and sighed to himself. Such a fine young man. How did it come to this? Ethan was oblivious to the driver's thoughts. Hearing the driver's urging, he snapped back to reality, pushed the door open, and got out. After explaining his purpose at the station, a police officer led him to the morgue. When they arrived, he found he wasn't the first one there. Helen Everleigh's eyes were red and swollen, clearly from a long bout of crying. Richard Everleigh was more composed, but his eyes were also rimmed with red. When they looked up and saw it was Ethan, their feelings were complicated. They had read their daughter's letter and knew she had only faked her death to escape, but they still couldn't help but resent Ethan. If it weren't for him, their Maddie would never have had to resort to such a drastic measure. And for Ethan, the moment he saw them, his heart sank to the absolute bottom. Suddenly, he couldn't take another step forward. He didn't dare to look at the body that lay so close. Chapter 11, Madeline's body was taken for cremation by Richard and Helen Everleigh, but Ethan intercepted them and took the urn. At first, her parents tried to get it back, but he refused to let go. Every argument ended with him declaring, "If you want this urn, you'll have to kill me first." Ethan moved out of the villa he had shared with Madeline. While clearing out his things, he discovered that everything related to their memories together had vanished. Connecting this to Madeline's strange behavior in her final days, he became convinced that her death, though ruled an accidental drowning by the police, was not an accident but a premeditated plan. That must be why she had rejected his intimacy, why she had tried to push him towards Sylvia, and why she had erased all traces of their shared past. In his bedroom, Ethan clutched the urn, surrounded by a mess of empty and half-empty liquor bottles. His eyes were filled with endless sorrow, regret, and a mocking self-pity. Madeline's intentions had been so obvious from the start. How could he have been so blind? He took another swig of hard liquor, the burning sensation spreading through him. He caressed the smooth surface of the urn, and when he closed his eyes, her smiling face appeared before him. "Maddie?" He was lost in his own world when the bedroom door was suddenly pushed open with great force. The light flooding in from the hallway forced him to squint. He looked up. The figure who had entered saw the state of the room and rushed toward him in a panic, stepping through the gaps between the bottles. She tried to take the urn from his arms and help him up. "Ethan!" The startled cry made him remember who she was. His body instinctively recoiled, pulling away from her touch and clutching the urn even tighter. The wariness in his eyes pained Sylvia, but seeing his haggard face and the stubble on his chin, her voice softened. "Ethan, you can't go on like this. You'll make yourself sick. Please put the box down. Let's go to the hospital, okay?" Hearing her voice, his eyes flickered. He finally looked directly at Sylvia. His voice was calm, but she heard an undercurrent of accusation. "You knew, didn't you? You knew Madeline had planned to leave, but you kept it from me." Sylvia was stunned by his question. It took her a moment to realize what he was asking, and her expression changed instantly. She looked utterly wronged, as if to say, "How could you think that of me?" "Ethan, I really didn't know anything. It was Maddie who came to me and said she wanted to work with me." "Work with you? On what?" Ethan seized on the keyword, his sharp gaze fixed on Sylvia. She had never seen such a look in his eyes before, and her hand, which had been gripping his arm, went limp. Finally, under his murderous stare, she confessed everything, her voice choked with sobs. At the end, she didn't forget to plead for herself. "Ethan, I really did it because I love you so much, but I swear I never targeted her after that. Ethan, your relationship was forced by her from the start. You didn't even like her. Now that she's dead, you're finally free. Shouldn't you be happy?" The moment her words were out, his hand shot out and closed around her throat. "Who told you I didn't like her?" Terrified, Sylvia's eyes turned red, instantly filling with tears that soon welled up and streamed down her cheeks, dripping onto his hand. The heat of her tears made his hand flinch, and he quickly pulled it away. After a long moment, he turned his back to her, hiding the coldness in his eyes. "Get out. I don't want to see you again." Ethan didn't know why seeing her cry caused a pang in his own heart, but he knew one thing for certain: he didn't love her. Otherwise, he never would have laid a hand on her just now. But just as he had always lost his reason because of her, repeatedly ignoring Madeline for her sake. Just as he hadn't always wanted to be confrontational with Madeline, but the words would twist themselves as they left his mouth, he couldn't see his own heart, nor could he control his own words and actions. It wasn't until Madeline died that the veil over his heart was lifted. He finally saw his own feelings clearly, which only made his past actions even more incomprehensible. At that moment, a sense of surreal absurdity spread through his heart. Chapter 12, 5 years later, in a quiet bar in a part of sea country far from the bustling city center, when Richard and Helen Everly, once again worried that their daughter would struggle living alone in a foreign country, sent her another huge sum of money, Karin Moss finally couldn't take it anymore and called them. "Mom, Dad, how many times do I have to tell you? I'm doing fine here. You don't need to worry about me, and you don't need to send me money so often." Meline, now living as Karin, felt helpless. 5 years ago, she had changed her name and moved here. Her parents, worried she wouldn't manage on her own, had made a habit of sending her money. She had used the money to open a quiet bar called Moss near a university. It had a steady stream of customers. Every year, one group graduated and left, and a new one arrived. These years had been truly pleasant and carefree. But as the frequency of her parents' transfers increased, Karin felt a growing sense of unease. Though she was in sea country, she had kept up with news from back home. She knew how much had changed in the past 5 years. Mrs. Hayes had passed away the day before Ethan became the new business magnate of a city. Karin regretted not being able to see the old woman one last time, but as much as she wanted to, she valued her own life more. Ethan was indeed brilliant, just as the original novel had described. That was why she had tried to minimize contact with her parents over the years. She worried that frequent contact would make him suspicious. If everything reverted to the original plot, her 5 years of effort would have been for nothing. But strangely, according to the original plot, he should have confessed his feelings to Sylvia and started a relationship with her by now. Instead, he had remained single for 5 years. She heard that he kept her urn with him at all times. People who didn't know the full story praised his deep love, but Karin always felt he had ulterior motives for keeping it. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. She resolved to have even less contact with home from now on. Suddenly, she heard a rap on the bar behind her. She turned around instinctively and found herself looking into a pair of deep eyes. "Bartender, a margarita, please." The voice was long lost yet familiar. Combined with the face she had known for thousands of days and nights, a face she could trace with her eyes closed, Karin's heart skipped a beat. She froze on the spot. "Bartender." Ethan Hayes raised an eyebrow and called out again, his voice a little louder. Karin hastily ended the call she was on, cursing herself internally. She knew it. With all the contact with home, his sharp mind would eventually figure out she wasn't dead. She just hadn't expected him to arrive so quickly, catching her completely off guard. Karin forced a calm expression, pointed to the closed sign hanging on the transparent partition, and deliberately lowered her voice. "We're on break today. Not open for business." Ethan chuckled softly. He picked up the sign and showed her the other side, which read "Open for Business," a playful glint in his eyes. "If I'm not mistaken, the closed side is supposed to face the customers, right?" Karin froze, her gaze following his hand to the sign. She realized she had forgotten to flip it over. A blush of embarrassment spread across her face. She snatched the sign back, hung it up with the closed side facing out, and said, "There, it's fixed now. Sir, Moss is closed for the day. If you want a drink, I suggest you find another place." Having given him the brush off, she lowered her head and busied herself, but the man at the bar didn't move. As she debated whether to speak again, Ethan spoke first. "Bartender, have we met somewhere before?" Chapter 13. Karin's body went rigid, her movements ceasing. She felt as if she could hear her own heart thudding, ready to burst from her chest. He had seen her face. The fact that he hadn't immediately drawn a conclusion was likely because he had seen Madeline's body. That must be why he was uncertain now, wondering if she was truly Meline or just a stranger who looked like her. That being the case, she had to remain calm to avoid deepening his suspicions. With that thought, Karin remained silent for a long moment before replying without looking up, trying to laugh it off. "Sir, has anyone ever told you that your pickup line is really cheesy?" "No. I've never used a pickup line on anyone before." Ethan's reply was unhesitating, as if he were rushing to prove something. Her mind was preoccupied with how to get rid of him, so she missed the undertone in his words and just kept trying to shoo him away. Finally, he relented slightly. "Well, bartender, will you be open tomorrow?" Seeing him back off, Karin secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She hesitated. If she avoided him too obviously, he might get suspicious. But if she didn't, their similar faces would surely raise his doubts, especially since he had tracked her all the way here. After a moment of thought, she chose a more neutral answer. Depends on my mood. The students are on break, so there aren't many customers at Moss lately. I might not open. It was a clear rejection, but to Ethan, it sounded like some kind of hint. He spoke again, as if to himself. So the bartender is saying that if there are more customers, you will open. Hearing this, Karin, after a long struggle, couldn't help but glance up at him before quickly looking down again. Sir, if you really want a drink, there are plenty of other bars and pubs nearby. You don't have to wait for Moss. What had happened in the last 5 years? Why had Ethan become so clingy? She hid her astonishment and didn't dare ask. He just stood there, waiting for her answer. It was only when she gave a reluctant nod that he finally left with a smile on his face. Karin truly didn't understand what he was up to. Once his presence was gone, she took out her phone again and called her parents. They answered almost immediately. Maddie, what is it? Is something wrong? Ethan found me. Mom, Dad, what on earth has happened all these years? I feel like he's changed so much. Karin rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming on. Her parents were silent for a moment before they hesitantly asked about the reason she had suddenly decided to fake her death all those years ago. After 5 years, her parents were asking again. She thought about it and decided not to hide it anymore, recounting the story of her awakening as if it were just a dream. From the very beginning, Richard and Helen Everly had disapproved of their relationship. It wasn't because Ethan was poor or that they felt he wasn't good enough. It was just that when they looked at him, they saw only one thing: he didn't love Meline. Her persistence would only lead to heartbreak. But she was the daughter they had raised with so much care. How could they watch her suffer, knowing the inevitable outcome? But back then, she had been too stubborn, fixated on Ethan, refusing to turn back until she hit a wall. And eventually, she did hit that wall and realized her parents had been right. Now, however, their attitude seemed to have shifted. Maddie, we've watched him work his way up to where he is today. We can feel that he likes you. If it was just a dream, why don't you come back? As soon as her mother finished, her father's voice followed. Yes, Maddie, and you said he found you, right? It's been 5 years. Come back and we'll face this challenge with you, okay? Chapter 14. In the end, Karin didn't agree right away. The idea of a villainous awakening sounded too absurd. It was within her expectations that her parents wouldn't believe her. As for Ethan loving her, she didn't buy it. They had been together for 6 years. If she had felt even a sliver of love from him, she might not have chosen to fake her death. And now, just because he hadn't ended up with his destined female lead and had instead kept her ashes, they were saying he loved her. But who knew? Maybe it was just because her faked death had thrown the plot off course, and one day he would return to his proper track. Karin tossed and turned that night, unable to sleep. She only drifted off into a hazy slumber as dawn broke. When she woke up, it was already afternoon. For some reason, she had slept exceptionally well, so well that her memory felt like a jumble, as if she had just woken from a dream, leaving her confused about what year it was. She sat on the bed in a daze for a long time before her memories finally fell back into place. She hurriedly got up and rushed to the bar. As expected, Ethan was already waiting outside, but he wasn't alone. Some of her regular customers were waiting there too. Logically, after she had told them a few days ago that she might not open, they shouldn't have come. Even if some did, it should have been only a few. But now, not only were they here, but they were all here, gathered in a large group around him. Karin didn't even have to guess. Ethan must have called them. Ethan spotted Karin walking toward them, and a smile finally broke through his somber expression. He walked up to her, his tone laced with meaning. "Bartender, you did come after all." The moment she saw Ethan, Karin suddenly froze. The memories she had just sorted out became a chaotic mess again. A flicker of confusion crossed her eyes, but in the next second, she was back to normal. After greeting the other customers one by one, she took out her key to open the door. As she walked inside, she saw him immediately follow her, and a wave of irritation washed over her. She had already chosen to leave, making way for him and his childhood sweetheart. Why wasn't he staying in the country with Sylvia? What was he doing here? The bar quickly became lively. As Karin mixed drinks for her customers, she felt puzzled by her own behavior and emotions. It was strange. Ever since Ethan had appeared, her memories seemed to be getting jumbled. For a fleeting moment, she had felt as if she were no longer herself. Fortunately, that feeling didn't last long, but in the end, Karin was certain of the source of these changes: Ethan Hayes. He sat down at the bar and ordered the same thing as yesterday, a margarita. A margarita wasn't hard to make. Soon, she placed the finished drink in front of him. "Sir, your drink?" He took the glass but didn't drink, just stared at her and suddenly said, "My name is Ethan Hayes." "All right, Mr. Hayes." Karin's expression was normal, as if she had truly never met him before. She simply nodded. Her reaction made him lose his patience. Before Ethan had come to see Country alone, he had already investigated her. He had sensed something was off with the Everly family a month ago. Apart from when he first saw the body, he had never seen the pain of losing a daughter in them. At first, he thought they were just hiding their grief deep inside. But then he discovered that a large sum of money had been transferred from the Everly family's accounts overseas every year for the past 5 years. After investigating, he realized the Everlys were hiding a big secret. Karin Moss, Meline Everly. Identical faces, identical builds, similar ages. One disappeared and the other suddenly appeared. If it were just one similarity, it could be a coincidence. But when so many similarities were pieced together, only the most impossible answer remained. He spoke, his voice filled with certainty. "Maddie, how long are you going to keep hiding?" Chapter 15, Karin looked up at him, her eyes filled with confusion. "Mr. Hayes, have you mistaken me for someone else? My name is Karin Moss. You can just call me Karin." She was determined to deny being Meline Everly. What could he do about it? After all, the identity of Meline Everly had been officially cancelled 5 years ago. The only person existing in this world now was Karin Moss. Ethan hadn't expected this reaction. He let out a laugh that was more exasperation than humor. Karin Moss? An orphan with no parents, who came to see Country 5 years ago to live with a relative. But for these 5 years, although you have a close elder you correspond with, he isn't from Sea Country and has never even been here. In other words, no one has ever seen this supposed relative of yours. Meanwhile, you've had close, private dealings with the city's wealthiest family, the Everlys, who transfer a large sum of money to an account in your name every 6 months. "Miss Moss, can you explain any of this?" Listening to his detailed account, Karin couldn't help but swallow hard. How could he have investigated so thoroughly? He probably hadn't even put this much effort into her when they were together. Now that she had faked her death and changed her identity, he had investigated her new life in such detail. Karin was furious and her gaze turned hostile. "Sir, I have no grievance with you, we're not related, and we're not friends. What right do you have to investigate me? Why I came to see Country, and who I have contact with is none of your business, is it?" Ethan was choked by her words, momentarily speechless. After a pause, he came up with another reason. "I am indebted to the Everly family. Your actions are highly suspicious, and you've taken such a large sum of money from them. I have the right to suspect you have ill intentions." He thought this would make her back down, but she just shot him a quizzical look and retorted again. "Even if I had ill intentions, it should be the Everly family who comes after me. It's not your place to interfere, is it? And in what capacity are you questioning me? As a friend of Mr. and Mrs. Everly, or as their deceased daughter's kept man?" The words "kept man" struck a nerve, and Ethan's eyes suddenly turned red. He pressed his lips together tightly, gave her one last deep look, and then turned and left without a word. A low-pressure system seemed to radiate from him. Somehow, Karin could read a sense of desolation in his retreating back. She opened her mouth to speak, knowing her words had been harsh, but in the end, she didn't call him back. After all, during their 5 years together, wasn't that how Ethan had always seen it? She provided the money. He provided his body. He had said things like that himself countless times. Why was he now playing the victim to gain her sympathy? But Karin also knew that since Ethan had found her, he wouldn't give up just because of one setback. It seemed that if she wanted peace, she would have to move again. It was a shame about the bar. It had been her companion for 5 years, and now its peace was being disrupted by Ethan's arrival. She got up and walked to the door. To avoid Ethan still lurking outside, she decided not to go home. She locked the bar's main door and slowly went upstairs. Lying in bed, Karin still couldn't understand why Ethan was doing all this. Was it just to get revenge on her for buying him back then? But hadn't she compensated him later? And he had agreed to the deal himself. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. Even if he hated her, it should have all been settled the moment she faked her death. Why did he have to chase her all the way here? She couldn't figure it out, so she decided to stop thinking about it and drifted off to sleep. Outside the bar, Ethan, just as she had predicted, hadn't left. The car engine was off. He sat in the driver's seat, staring at the steering wheel, a bitter taste in his mouth. Kept man. In her heart was that all he ever was to her. Chapter 16, the for sale notice for Moss was posted the very next day. Karin didn't keep any of the equipment. The next owner also planned to open a bar, so she gave it all to them. She moved so quickly that even Ethan was stunned. He hadn't even seen when she left. But this only solidified his conviction. Karin Moss was Meline Everly. She had planned to leave Sea Country for another, but she hadn't expected Ethan to corner her at the airport. "If you're not Maddie, why are you running away?" To this day, Ethan still didn't understand why Meline had chosen to fake her death. Faced with his question, a flicker of confusion crossed her eyes. Running away? Why was she running? What was she running from? Her mind became a chaotic mess. Her memories seemed to be scrambling, reorganizing. In just a moment, she broke out in a cold sweat, her lips turning pale. The sudden change startled Ethan, his heart pounding in his chest. Seeing her legs give way as she was about to collapse, he rushed to catch her and carry her. "Maddie, don't be scared, I'll take you to the hospital." The moment he spoke, her breathing steadied. She shook her head at him. "I want to go home." Seeing her recover, Ethan finally let out a breath of relief. But when she said she wanted to go home, he was at a loss, unsure which home she meant. Karin saw his confusion, sighed, and asked him to put her down. She went to the ticket counter and bought a ticket for the next flight back to their home country. Seeing this, Ethan bought a ticket for the same flight. "Why did you come looking for me?" Once they were on the plane, Karin finally gave up hiding her identity. She figured Ethan was already convinced anyway. Besides, there was a more important reason she had suddenly decided to go back from the day Ethan had reappeared. Her memories had been secretly altered. She was afraid that in the end, she would truly forget her real name was Meline Everly. She was afraid she would forget everything, forget her parents. Ethan looked at her but didn't answer her question. Instead, he asked the question that had been plaguing him ever since he discovered she was alive. "Why did you choose to leave like that back then?" "I asked first, you answer first." Karin rubbed her temples. His persistence was giving her a throbbing headache. After a long silence, Ethan finally relented and spoke first. "I don't know. I just wanted to see you again. I wanted to see if you were happier without me, if that was why you suddenly didn't want me anymore. Because I can't bear a life without you." His confession remained hidden beneath the silence. In the end, all he could say were those 3 words. Karin was stunned. For some reason, that feeling of being controlled swept over her again. He opened his mouth, but she couldn't hear a single word. The soft chatter of other passengers reached her ears, confirming her hearing was fine. Yet, Ethan's lips were moving, and she heard nothing. In that instant, Karin suddenly remembered her altered memories. A flash of insight struck her. She understood the real reason for all of this. The novel world was real, and they had to follow their designated paths. The villainous Medeline's ending was death. So, when she left as Karin Moss, she was fine. But Meline Everly was already dead. So, when Ethan found her and wanted her to admit she was Meline, her memories would become scrambled. She would gradually forget who she was and believe she was truly Karin Moss. He was the male lead, and the male lead Ethan Hayes was destined to be with the female lead. Therefore, he couldn't fall in love with someone else. Even if he did, it would be forcibly corrected. So, she could go back, but there would never be a future for them. Because in Ethan Hayes' world, Meline Everly could only ever be someone who was already long dead. Chapter 17, when the plane landed, Karin didn't linger. She didn't even look back at Ethan, who remained standing where he was. Ethan wanted to chase after her, but his legs felt as if they were filled with lead, rooting him to the spot. He could only watch as her back grew smaller and smaller, finally disappearing into the crowd. It was then that Sylvia Quinn, dressed in a white dress, appeared at the airport, waving at him. "Ethan, I'm here to pick you up. Did you bring me back a present from your business trip this time?" When Ethan saw Sylvia, who had been avoiding him for so long, suddenly appear, he felt a deep sense of strangeness. Hearing her refer to his trip as a business trip and so casually ask for a gift, that feeling intensified. This Sylvia, the one who acted so familiar, hadn't been seen since he found out she had framed Madeline 5 years ago and told her to get lost. It was like a broken circle that had, without any repairs, bizarrely returned to its original state. He didn't know what was happening, but at that moment he had only one thought. He refused to be a puppet on a string. His legs, which had been frozen just moments before, gradually loosened as Sylvia approached. He walked toward her, but a cold glint appeared in his eyes. He thought he understood why Madeline had suddenly left back then. And now, he thought, he might have to try something himself. Sylvia's chirping voice still buzzed in his ears, giving him a headache. Suddenly, he stopped, looked at her, and said in a voice devoid of any emotion, "Shut up. Can't you be quiet for a second? You're so annoying." Startled by his rebuke, Sylvia stopped in her tracks, a hurt expression on her face. Yet her words were still filled with concern. "Ethan, what's wrong? Are you too tired? Let's hurry back then." She tried to take his hand, but he pulled away. She tried to make conversation, but he ignored her completely. Outside the airport, a driver who was already waiting opened the car door for him. As soon as he got in, he closed his eyes, completely ignoring Sylvia, who was about to speak. He didn't see her hurt expression, nor did he see the venomous look hidden beneath it. It was all that Madeline's fault. Dead, but still not letting anyone rest in peace. Ever since Madeline died, Ethan had treated her with this cold indifference. But before that, he had never resisted her advances. Before that, she could feel that he wasn't entirely without feelings for her. She had truly believed Madeline was trying to help her, but she never imagined Madeline had been plotting something like this, determined to make everyone miserable. But after her initial venom, Sylvia felt a wave of helplessness. She hated Madeline, but what could she do? Madeline was already dead. She had become an untouchable, sacred memory in Ethan's heart, and Sylvia couldn't even do anything to her. But soon, she realized she was wrong. The car stopped in front of Ethan's villa, but he didn't go home. Instead, he walked in the opposite direction. Sylvia, puzzled, quickly got out of the car and followed him. "Ethan, where are you going?" Ethan didn't wait for her or answer her question. Sylvia could only follow closely behind, but as they walked, she realized something was wrong. He was heading in the direction of the Everly estate. But ever since Madeline's death, Ethan's relationship with the Everlys had deteriorated sharply, and he had never visited them again. He had just returned from a business trip today. Why would he suddenly think of going to the Everly estate? Though Ethan's villa and the Everly estate were in opposite directions, they weren't too far apart. So, it didn't take them long to arrive. In the living room, Karin had already been home for a while. Richard and Helen Everly were gathered around her, asking about her experiences in sea country over the past 5 years. Karin was patiently answering when the doorbell rang. She turned her head in confusion. The butler went to open the door and hesitated for a moment upon seeing who was outside. But Ethan didn't care. He pushed past and stormed in. Chapter 18, where Ethan went, Sylvia was determined to follow. She trailed right behind him. The butler chased after them in a panic, but couldn't stop the determined pair. The living room door was suddenly thrown open. Karin instinctively turned her head and met the gazes of both Ethan and Sylvia. "You're not dead." The moment she saw Karin's face, Sylvia couldn't contain her shock and cried out. A wave of fury surged within her. So, this was her real plan all along. First, she claimed she would set her up with Ethan to placate her. Then, she faked her death to solidify her place in Ethan's heart. And now, she was choosing the perfect moment to return, all so she could snatch Ethan away for good. Sylvia stared at her, the venom in her eyes almost impossible to hide. Her blatant stare naturally caught the attention of Richard and Helen, who both frowned. The out-of-breath butler who had chased them saw the 5 people in the living room and apologized profusely. "Mr. and Mrs. Everly, they just barged in. We really couldn't stop them." Helen waved her hand, dismissing the butler, who let out a sigh of relief and quickly retreated. As the door closed, Karin looked at the intruders, her tone displeased. "Mr. Hayes and Miss Quinn, you certainly know how to make an entrance. May I ask what you hope to achieve by barging into a private residence?" Ethan knew his actions were rude, but he also knew that if he had waited for the butler to announce him, he might not have been able to see Madeline. He could only apologize first. "I'm sorry, Maddie. I just wanted to talk to you. I have no other intentions." After explaining himself, he thought of Sylvia, who had followed him in and rubbed his temples in frustration. He had never really noticed it before, but Sylvia was like a stubborn leech, clinging to him wherever he went. He turned to her, a flicker of impatience in his eyes. "Why are you always following me? Don't you have your own life?" Once again, he had singled her out, and Sylvia felt a familiar wave of hurt. She just liked him too much, was too afraid of losing him. Why couldn't he even stand her following him? They had been childhood friends for years. Hadn't he always favored her before? But to avoid making Ethan even more disgusted with her, Sylvia eventually left the living room on her own. She didn't leave the Everly estate, though. She paced aimlessly by the entrance, waiting. She wanted to be the first person he saw when they finished talking. In the living room, Richard and Helen exchanged a look. They turned to see Karin and Ethan locked in a standoff, neither speaking. Finally, Richard cleared his throat, breaking the tense atmosphere. "We have some things to attend to, so we'll go upstairs. You two young people should sit down and talk things through. Don't always be fighting and throwing tantrums." Without waiting for a response, they got up and went upstairs. The vast living room was suddenly left with just two people. After a long silence, Ethan finally spoke. "Maddie," but he had barely gotten the word out before Karin cut him off. "If you have something to say, just say it. I bought you back then, and you always treated me like ice. Now that the contract is over and we've broken up, I don't think our relationship warrants such a familiar address. Besides, Madeline Everly is dead. The only person living now is Karin, the adopted daughter of the Everly family." Chapter 19, hearing the clear line Karin was drawing between them, Ethan felt a sharp pain in his chest. A bitter taste spread through his mouth. He turned the words over and over in his throat before he finally managed to force them out. "Maddie, I was stubborn before. I was unwilling to admit to a relationship that started so disgracefully. It wasn't until I heard the news of your death that I realized how stupid I had been. But Maddie, you have to believe me. I really do like you." Before he could finish, Karin cut him off again. "You like me. And then what?" After a failed attempt to correct his use of her name, Karin decided to skip it and address his words directly. Ethan was taken aback, not understanding her question. Her face was cold, her voice devoid of emotion. Madeline Everly, entangled with Ethan Hayes, has only one ending: death. "Ethan, I refuse to believe you haven't noticed anything unusual." The events on the plane were still vivid in her mind. But Karin was sure that even if he didn't know about her awakened memories, even if he still hadn't realized that her near-fainting spell was because of him scrambling her memories, the time he lost his voice was enough to make him understand that there was something wrong with this world. Ethan thought of the blatant sense of control he had felt before. He moved his lips but was speechless. He had indeed noticed it, but he refused to accept his fate. He had someone he loved. He didn't want to be manipulated into a journey without her. "Mad!" He had just started to say her name when he remembered what Karin had said, that the Madeline entangled with Ethan Hayes was doomed. He forced himself to change his address, his eyes filled with determination as he looked at her. "Karin, wait for me. I will find a way to walk to you without any obstacles. When that day comes, no one will be able to stop us." Karin watched him deliver his grand declaration, momentarily stunned into silence. "No one can stop us. Will that day really come? A day without being controlled by the plot, without having memories erased, without having to watch him fall in love with someone else." Karin had thought she had accepted that fate. But now, hearing Ethan's words, an uncontrollable sliver of hope sprouted in her heart. She watched him turn and walk away after his declaration, and then she lowered her head, a sense of loss washing over her. "But Ethan, I've waited for you for so long, and I still can't be sure. Do you really love me, or have you just mistaken obsession for love? Otherwise, why have I never felt any of your affection for me?" she murmured to herself. Upstairs, Richard and Helen heard the silence and peeked their heads out. Seeing their daughter's lonely, dejected back, their hearts ached for her. They hurried downstairs and rushed to Karin's side, comforting her softly. "What's wrong, Maddie? Did you fight with him?" Karin, who had only been feeling a little down, broke down completely at the sound of her mother's gentle voice. She buried her head in her mother's embrace and burst into tears. Richard and Helen didn't know what had happened and were at a loss for how to comfort her. They could only exchange helpless glances before turning back to gently soothe her, waiting for her to calm down on her own. A few minutes later, having cried her heart out, Karin remained nestled in her mother's arms. She looked up, her lips downturned, with tear tracks still wet on her cheeks. "Dad, Mom, what if the dream I had was real?" Her parents finally understood. She was still anxious about that dream. The thought was almost comical. She had faked her death and lived alone in a foreign country for 5 years because of a dream, which was already unbelievable. Now that she was finally back, she was still so hung up on it. But when their eyes met Karin's wronged gaze, they quickly straightened their expressions. "Don't be afraid, Maddie. No matter what happens, Mom and Dad will be with you every step of the way." Chapter 20. When Ethan walked out of the living room, Sylvia was just returning from the direction of the garage. The moment their eyes met, her breath caught in her throat. He didn't see anything, did he? As she thought this, his gaze shifted from her to the garage and back again, his eyes narrowing. "What were you doing? What could I be doing? I was just bored, so I took a walk." She shook her head and waved her hands, forcing a laugh as she denied everything. After her explanation, she quickly changed the subject. "Ethan, are you done talking with Maddie? It's getting late, we should be heading back." At the mention of Madeline, Sylvia hesitated. She had seen Madeline's body back then. Although it was disfigured after being in the water for 3 days, the face was deeply etched in her memory. That was Madeline. There was no mistake. But if that body was Madeline's, then who was the person she had just seen in the villa? It couldn't be a ghost, could it? The idea of someone coming back from the dead was too absurd. Ethan, wasn't Maddie from 5 years ago, then who was that person just now? Ethan just glanced at her and started walking out of the estate. When she caught up, he turned his head and gave her a warning look. "She is not Madeline Everly. She is the Everly family's adopted daughter, named Karin Moss. Sylvia, you'd better get rid of those little ideas of yours. If anything happens to her because of you, not only will the Everlys not let you off, neither will I, and you know I mean it." Sylvia quickly shook her head, a sycophantic smile on her face. "Ethan, how could I possibly do something like that?" Ethan didn't say whether he believed her or not. He just kept walking forward. She almost couldn't keep up, but a sense of triumph rose in her heart. Adopted daughter, Karin Moss. If she had been a little unsure before, now she was completely certain of her suspicions. The name, the face, and the fact that they were both daughters of the Everly family. Who would believe there wasn't something fishy going on? How could there be so many coincidences in the world? Though she didn't know what tricks Madeline had used, it was undeniable that 5 years ago, she had faked her death to get away. Now, she had just changed her name and returned to a city. If you had already decided to fake your death, why come back now? Wouldn't it be better to just die for real? Why did you have to come back and fight with me for Ethan? But whether she was Madeline or if it was all just a coincidence, Sylvia couldn't let her get close to Ethan again. If she died, Ethan might be sad for a while, but time heals all wounds. When she was the only one left by his side, he would eventually fall in love with her. She glanced back at the Everly villa, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. "So, Madeline Everly, just go die. Once you're dead, all of this will be over." At the Everly villa, Karin refused to go back to using the name Madeline Everly. Her parents, helpless, had to compromise. "All right, if you don't want to, you don't have to. Maddie, in that case, will hold a banquet soon to officially announce your identity as our adopted daughter. It will make things more convenient for you." Karin didn't refuse the suggestion and nodded. After all, she couldn't just hide in the villa forever after returning. She needed a legitimate identity to move around freely. Ethan hadn't seen Karin since that day. He was busy searching for a way to break free from the control. Soon, news spread that the Everly family was holding a welcome banquet for their newly adopted daughter. When he received the invitation sent by her parents, he hesitated for only a moment before accepting it. He wanted to see Karin, even if it was just from a distance. Chapter 21. The welcome banquet was held at the largest hotel in a city. Almost every wealthy family had received an invitation, yet no one had heard anything about this suddenly appeared adopted daughter of the Everly family. But the grand scale of the event made it clear that the Everlys valued her greatly. This piqued everyone's curiosity. They all wanted to see what kind of person this adopted daughter was, what skills she possessed to cause such a stir in the long, quiet Everly family. On the day of the banquet, Guests arrived early, waiting for the guest of honor to appear. The venue was already beautifully decorated, but the hosts were nowhere to be seen. Guests mingled in small groups, sipping drinks and complaining about the Everlies. What's with the Everlies today? They invited all of us here to introduce their new adopted daughter, but we've been here for so long, and they still haven't shown up. Exactly for any other banquet, the hosts are always the first to arrive. This isn't their first time hosting, how could they make such a mistake? In a corner, Ethan listened to the chatter, and his eyelid began to twitch violently. A sense of unease washed over him. Richard, Helen, and Karin were all missing. This was highly unusual. A terrible suspicion began to form in his mind. Some of the guests who were closer to the Everly family also finally noticed something was wrong. This isn't right. They haven't shown up after all this time. Could something have happened? Maybe someone should try to contact them and see what's going on? Yes, let's call them. One of them took out his phone. Just as he was about to find Richard's number, a news alert popped up on the screen. A major car accident occurred on Spring Hill Road this afternoon. A man and 2 women in the car were seriously injured and have been rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. The accident has been determined to be caused by brake failure. Spring Hill Road. Wasn't that the main road from the Everly villa to the hotel? And the detail about 1 man and 2 women, it was all but screaming that the people in the accident were the missing Everly family. Ethan shot up from his seat, all reason gone. He rushed out of the hotel while pulling out his phone and dialing a number. Find out which hospital the 3 people from this afternoon's car accident were taken to. The address arrived just as Ethan got into his car. He glanced at it, and without another moment's hesitation, he sped off toward the location his assistant had sent. 10 minutes later, at a City First hospital, Ethan quickly found out the room numbers for the Everly family and went straight upstairs. The 3 of them had just come out of surgery and were still unconscious, but thankfully, their lives were not in danger. It was only after hearing that they were out of danger that Ethan finally breathed a sigh of relief. He then had time to think about the cause of the accident. For a family like the Everlys, their cars were regularly maintained. It was impossible for the brakes to fail naturally. A sudden brake failure could only mean one thing: it was deliberate. And when he thought of deliberate action, the image of Sylvia, emerging from the direction of the garage the day he had gone to see Karin, flashed in his mind. A wave of regret washed over him. Of course, Sylvia had held ill will toward Karin for 5 years. Now that she was back, how could she possibly have just waited outside doing nothing? Sylvia's guilt had been so obvious that day. How could he have missed it? If he had been more careful, if he had warned Karin earlier, would this tragedy have been averted? After regret came an overwhelming rage. He had warned Sylvia that day. He had told her that if anything happened to Karin because of her, not only would the Everly family not let her go, but neither would he. And now, she had treated his words like empty threats, causing the entire Everly family to end up in the hospital. Sylvia Quinn, you've done well. Chapter 22. After a full week in the hospital, Richard, Helen, and Karin finally regained consciousness one by one. Seeing the caregiver by her side, Karin subconsciously tried to sit up but was gently stopped. I'm a caregiver hired by Mr. Hayes. Your parents are in the next room, and Mr. Hayes has hired caregivers for them as well. Please rest assured. You've just woken up, and your injuries haven't fully healed. You must be careful not to move around too much. Her mind was still foggy, a jumble of thoughts. Hearing the caregiver's words, she obediently lay back down. Seeing that she had calmed down, the caregiver took out her phone and called Ethan. Mr. Hayes, Miss Moss is awake. In a small, dark storage room in the Hayes villa, the only window had been sealed shut. The miscellaneous items previously stored there had all been cleared out to ensure that Sylvia, trapped inside, couldn't use anything to escape. The closely guarded Sylvia was bound at the hands, a rag stuffed in her mouth. Her lips were cracked and dry, and she was so hungry she was barely conscious. Thrown in a corner in a wretched state, she could only muster the last of her strength to whimper and plead with Ethan. He hung up the phone. Hearing the news from the caregiver, his gaze shifted to Sylvia, and a rare smile touched his lips. Sylvia Quinn, you should be glad that Karin and her parents woke up. With that, he turned and left the storage room, watching as the servants locked the door behind him before he left for the hospital with peace of mind. Inside the storage room, the last sliver of light vanished as the door was locked, plunging Sylvia into complete darkness. Her face was streaked with tears of fear and resentment. She had grown up with Ethan. Besides his grandmother, she was the only one he had ever accepted into his inner circle. She had always believed she was the most special person in his heart. But then, to save his grandmother, he became Madeline's boyfriend. And although he still cared more for her than for Meline, she was still consumed with a jealousy that drove her mad. Why was it that she had been by his side for so many years and still couldn't be his girlfriend, while Meline could so easily occupy that position for 5 whole years? So she had framed Meline time and time again, trying to make him despise her completely. Everything was going according to her plan, but then Meline had to go and die. Meline became his untouchable, sacred memory, while she, simply for having targeted Meline in the past, was completely cast aside. Though she remained by his side, he mostly treated her like air. She had waited another 5 years, thinking she would finally get her wish, but then Meline had to come back. She wanted Meline dead. She wanted the entire Everly family to go to hell with her, but Ethan had discovered her plan. She had been locked in this dark storage room for a week, never seeing the light of day, tormented by him daily, where even eating and drinking became a luxury. She had been brought to this state, yet Meline and her family had survived unscathed. Sylvia's heart was filled with a grief and hatred she couldn't vent. She clenched her teeth so hard that the metallic taste of blood soon filled her mouth. But her mind was not clear. The extreme hunger and thirst made the taste of blood trigger a single, overwhelming thought. She was so thirsty. She raised her bound hands and bit down hard on her wrist. Meanwhile, Ethan was driving to the hospital when a sharp pain suddenly pierced his mind. His grip on the steering wheel loosened, and the car veered out of control, heading straight for a tree on the side of the road. The piercing sound of the horn exploded in his ears. His head slammed into the steering wheel with the force of the impact. Screams, the sound of shattering glass, in the haze of his fading consciousness, he thought he heard the drip, drip, drip of something falling to the ground. Is this it? Am I going to die? Chapter 23, just before his consciousness completely faded, a mechanical voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Warning, warning, male and female leads are in mortal danger. Life signs are weak. World collapse is imminent, male and female leads. What does that mean? Who is speaking in my ear? Is this some kind of auditory hallucination before death? Ethan had no time to think before he completely lost consciousness. When he woke up again, he found himself in a strange space. Countless lines of code floated in the air. He reached out to touch them, but his hand passed right through the data stream. A glowing orb of light slowly drifted in front of him. It scanned him, and immediately, red exclamation marks appeared in front of the code strings. Data anomaly detected. Cleansing required. Cleansing initiated. The orb's voice was devoid of any emotion, mechanically executing its command. As the words faded, Ethan felt that sharp, piercing pain again. Then, he felt an invisible force forcibly erasing his memories. To his horror, he realized he was starting to forget his memories of Meline. Panic spread through Ethan's heart. He wanted to escape this place, but was powerless. He wanted to fight back, but he couldn't even touch the orb of light. What terrified him even more were the orb's next words. Male and female lead emotional data anomaly. Cleansing and rewriting required. Male lead has developed feelings for the villainous. Cleansing and rewriting required. Male lead has developed murderous intent toward the female lead. Cleansing and rewriting required. As the orb droned on, Ethan suddenly realized something. He stared at the orb, his voice a low growl, each word bitten off. You're the things that have been controlling me. I'm the male lead. I developed murderous intent toward the female lead. Don't tell me the female lead is Sylvia Quinn. And the villainess is Meline. The orb's voice stuttered for a moment after hearing his questions. It took a while before it spoke again. This system is only responsible for maintaining the normal operation of this world. It is not responsible for answering this question. It was that very stutter and refusal to answer that confirmed Ethan's suspicions. A sense of absurdity rose from the depths of his being. Who wouldn't be unable to accept that the world they lived in was just a controlled reality? But then, Ethan remembered the words he had heard just before he lost consciousness. Male and female leads are in mortal danger. Life signs are weak. World collapse is imminent. So, it wasn't a hallucination. Both he and Sylvia had been in mortal danger, and the world was about to collapse. That was why they had pulled him into this space for a checkup. Thinking of this, Ethan's eyes flickered. He had thought that faking his death once, like Meline, would allow him to escape the control. He just needed to adopt a new identity. He hadn't had a chance to try it yet, but now, an opportunity to break free completely was right in front of him. If the death of the male and female leads would cause the world to collapse, and this thing calling itself a system only cared about the world's normal operation, then he had room to negotiate. "Let me go, I don't want to be your damn male lead, I just want to be with Maddie." Ethan's breathing was ragged. He was terrified the system would reactivate and continue wiping his memory. If he really forgot Meline and became a puppet living under someone else's control, he would rather die. The system's light flickered, as if it didn't understand what he was saying. Then it heard him speak again. "You can wipe my memories, but you can't wipe away my love for Maddie. Even if I forget everything now, one day after I leave here, I will remember. The person I truly love isn't your damn, pre-written female lead. If you try to force me to follow your plot, then I will kill myself." Chapter 24, the system fell into a rare silence, its light pulsing as it hovered around him. After a long while, it finally spoke, its voice no longer a mechanical repetition of commands. "Is being the male lead not good enough? You can have enviable opportunities and endless wealth, a female lead whose entire world revolves around loving you. If you wish, you can become the most powerful person in this world." Its voice had softened, taking on a persuasive tone, hoping this human would understand its implication. As long as he accepted the memory wipe and rewrite, returning to his proper track, he would have everything he could ever want except for the love of the villainess. But unfortunately for the system, Ethan was completely unmoved by its temptation. He stubbornly shook his head, his gaze firm. "I don't want any of it. I just want to be with my Maddie. Even if it means losing everything you've ever had, you won't regret it." The system didn't understand human emotions. It only knew that from its perspective, this was not a favorable choice. But he nodded. "No regrets. But Meline Everly is destined to die. The very purpose of her existence is to complete her entanglement with the male lead and ultimately die at his hands." The system's words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He stood frozen, his mind a complete blank. So, even though Meline had faked her death once, she was still destined to follow her predetermined fate. The system watched his stunned expression with satisfaction, indulging in its own wicked pleasure. Although the orb had no face, the intensity of its pulsing light revealed its current smugness. Who did he think he was, threatening me? Since its creation in this space, it had managed countless worlds. The male lead of one small world was nothing. It could just find a replacement. The thought stopped abruptly. The pulsing light paused. Wait, isn't not being the male lead exactly what he wants? The system hovered in place for a moment, its data streams nearly tangling into a knot. In a flash, it decided to throw caution to the wind. Pretending to check the plot's development, it stopped teasing Ethan. "Oh my, it seems Meline Everly already completed her storyline and died 5 years ago." It was only when he heard this that Ethan snapped back to reality. So, what it meant by Meline being destined to die was the same thing she had told him. He let out a sigh of relief, but the system's attention was already back on him. "Everything you possess now is a result of your male lead halo. If you truly decide to give up this identity, you'll have nothing when you return to the real world. Not every side character has the good fortune of Karin Moss, becoming the daughter of a billionaire. If you willingly give up your role as the male lead, someone else will take your place. You won't even be able to keep your own name." Just like Meline, if she were Meline, she was destined for death. If she were Karin, a minor character never mentioned before, she could forge her own path. The system thought its words would scare Ethan into submission, but to its surprise, he just nodded with firm resolve. "I voluntarily give up my identity as the male lead and everything I have gained because of it. With no regrets?" the system confirmed one last time. His answer remained unchanged. "No regrets." Chapter 25. The day she woke up, Karin had heard from the caregiver that Ethan would be coming, but he never appeared, not even by the day she and her parents were discharged. She had initially thought the caregiver had lied to her, only to find out later that Ethan had been in a car accident. His injuries were severe, he had almost not made it. Startled, she immediately asked the caregiver to take her to see him. In the intensive care unit, Ethan lay unconscious. The only signs of life were the thin layer of mist on his ventilator mask and the beeping of the heart monitor. The caregiver told her he had lost consciousness without warning while driving to see her that day, which filled her with a sense of guilt. When they had met again after 5 years, she had never shown him a kind face, all because, as she had said, she had never felt his love for her. But now, seeing him lying so lifelessly on the hospital bed, a pang of pain shot through her own heart. When she and her parents had been in their accident, he had been there to take care of them. But when he had his accident, she only found out after she was fully recovered. "I'm sorry, Ethan." He really didn't owe her anything. Their relationship back then had been her own doing. It was normal for him not to like her. Later, when she had given up on that relationship and tried to escape her tragic fate, he had been the one to pursue her. She had held a grudge against him for those 5 years, yet he had never taken her coldness to heart. She lowered her head, her voice catching in her throat. Her peripheral vision caught a slight movement in his fingers. Her heart leaped, and she quickly pressed the call button. Not long after, a doctor rushed in. Ethan was awake. When he opened his eyes, the doctor had already left. A nurse was giving instructions to a woman. As the woman turned toward him, Ethan's gaze froze on her face. Madeline Everly, a person who had died 5 years ago. No, that wasn't right. He remembered the welcome banquet the Everly family had been throwing. He realized she must be the adopted daughter. He frowned, his instinctive dislike for the Everly family surfacing. Seeing her approach, he quickly stopped her. "What are you doing here?" The familiar yet distant voice stunned Karin. She hadn't expected such a reaction. As she was about to explain, she realized something was wrong. This wasn't Ethan. Or rather, he wasn't the Ethan who had recently told her he loved her and would find a way to be with her. He was more like the Ethan from the original plot, who utterly detested Madeline. Realizing this, Karin instantly masked her emotions. "I came to see you, and also to thank you for hiring people to take care of me and my parents after our accident. I'll pay you back." Without waiting for Ethan's reaction, she turned and left. As she walked out of the hospital room, her steps slowed. If the current Ethan had become the Ethan from the original plot, then what about the Ethan from before? Had he disappeared? She walked out of the hospital, a sense of loss washing over her. Her parents were waiting for her in the car. Seeing her expression, they thought Ethan's injuries were severe and asked with concern, but Karin just shook her head. "He's awake, but from now on, I don't think he'll have any dealings with the Everly family." Her parents couldn't get any more information out of her, so they drove home. But as they approached the Everly villa, the car, which should have driven straight into the garage, stopped at the gate. "Sir, ma'am, miss, I think there's someone at the gate." Hearing the driver, the three of them leaned out to look. There was indeed a thin figure huddled by the gate. Seeing only a silhouette, Richard and Helen assumed it was a beggar and were about to have him sent away when a thought flashed through Karin's mind. She stopped them and got out of the car. Seeing Karin head straight for the beggar, her parents couldn't stop her in time and had to follow. Karin was already standing in front of the man. "Who are you? Why are you here?" The beggar looked up, revealing a face she had loved for years. When he saw it was her, his eyes lit up with joy. "Karin, I told you I would find a way to walk to you without any obstacles. I did it. From now on, I'm not the male lead, Ethan Hayes, I'm just Leo Ashton. But the price was I have nothing now. So, are you willing to buy me one more time? Room and board is all I ask. I can even warm your bed." Hearing this, Karin instantly understood. Ethan was the male lead. He had to follow his plot. So, the Ethan who loved her had now become the penniless Leo Ashton. She smiled at him and nodded. "All right. But I have a lot of demands. If you can't meet them, the deal's off."